This is our Kamitic way of life class, right? Okay. Now let's get back to some fundamentals, right? Okay. The word that we use for, to express the entirety of man is being, correct? Okay, being. If you want to have a spiritual science, right? Then if you want to make your study of spirituality scientific, you must start off with a very clear nomenclature, a very precise labeling system. A lot of confusion and a lot of the failure for people to understand spirituality comes from the fact that their exposure to the spiritual literature was accomplished through imprecise language. For a number of reasons. One is that a lot of the literature out there, the people who wrote it, didn't experience the spiritual things they were speaking about. So they use, so they just confused terms, but they didn't know what they're talking about. There were people who read other people's works, who read other people's work. It's a borrowing, and without the understanding of the reality that the words were aiming at. Another problem comes from the translation into Western languages, okay, and Western culture. Well, that wasn't their thing. Spirituality was not their thing. They received this, it's a transmitted information, and, it's not a controversial issue. It's very well established historically. Thing is that a lot of the main historical books have been suppressed. You understand that? But if you go to the sources, books by Strabo and book by Diodorus Siculus and Herodotus and, Epicurus and all of these original Greek authors, they'll tell you in a minute that they got their stuff from the ancient Egyptians and from the Babylonians and things of this nature. It's another story that I need not get into right now. The point that I want to make to you is that there's this imprecision of language. You with me? So when I want to refer to the totality of who I am, what I am, and so forth, I use the word being. I don't say myself, I say my being. You with me? And when you want to refer to gods, the word for God that will be synonymous with being in the Kamitic tradition is Neb, Chair. So this will be the word that describes, that represents God's being, Neb, Chair. Neb is Lord, right? Is off, and Chair is all, the Lord of all. Okay? This is important because some of you read, other books and besides my books and things of that nature, and almost all the authors use the word neter for God. The Kamitic word neter for God, and of course the Kamitic word neter gives us the Latin word natura, nature, and it gives us the word also neutral. You see a connection there. Supreme Being will be neutral in the sense that it is not male or female. You understand that? And there is a duality underlying all manifestation. Okay, there's a duality underlying all manifestation. So being, and that's because being is dual. and everything is dual, and Western scientists are wasting billions of dollars, or perhaps they might even waste trillions of dollars looking for the unipolar entity, a one-pole entity. If it exists and has form, well, it has one side and another side. Anyhow. But, so Nebuchadnezzar has two divisions. One is non-material, non-energy. It's a non-matter energy, or shall we say it's devoid of energy, right? And this corresponds to that aspect of being which is consciousness, will. And it is what we will call the self, meaning consciousness, right? You're conscious, right? Your consciousness itself. Okay, your consciousness that is in a form, right? And there's this physical body that you're in, but there are other bodies that you're in as well. All right? That's an assumption for many of you right now, and so on. But consciousness being awareness, it is that which is aware. It is that which understands. It is that which knows, right? Okay? I mean, logically speaking, if there's no consciousness, there could be no knowledge. If there's no consciousness, there could be no, because knowledge is a function of perception. Right? Right? There's perception without recognition. When perception takes place with recognition, there's what? Knowledge. Right? And when this knowledge takes place on an underlying level, just not the surface, but on the underlying principles, then there's understanding. Understanding. You're standing from a point of view where you're no longer thinking superficially. You're grasping the underlying principles. So, consciousness is that which knows, right? Where there's no consciousness, there can be no knowledge, right? It is that which knows, that which understands, okay, that which wills, right? That which is aware. Is that clear to you? And consciousness can recognize that it is conscious. Are you conscious? Do you recognize the fact that you're conscious? I'm not talking down to you. I just want you to, you've been trained to think a certain way, to approach knowledge a certain way, like from books and definitions. I want for you to do this empirically. Because you will find that a major aspect of spirituality is for you to experience what we call pure consciousness. To experience the fact that you are not conscious, but consciousness itself. So, do you recognize that you're conscious? The recognition of consciousness is identity. When you recognize that you're conscious, you are identifying yourself with this consciousness. Correct? And if you cease to be conscious, you will cease to be, correct? Even though you have a body there. You will cease to be if you cease to be conscious. Meaning, if you are conscious, you know. If you're not conscious, you don't know. You don't understand. You don't recognize. Is that clear to you? So therefore, the word self involves identity. What represents the I? So within being, that which says I is consciousness, which we're saying is non-material, non-energy. And of course, that's an assumption right now. That's a preposition to you. But it's something that you have to come to realize. That's part of the spiritual work, stripped from all its mumbo-jumbo. Now let's be very logical, right? If I say that being has a duality, if one aspect is non-material, non-energy, the other half has to be an energy, right? Right? An energy matter entity, correct? We know this energy and matter, that part of being is energy and matter. We know that for sure. And one of the biggest mistakes, one of the biggest blunder in the history of the world that has totally messed up the world is the imputing of consciousness to energy, to the energy matter part of being. When we talk about, when we say the conscious mind, for example, well, mind is what? That which manifests thoughts, images, sounds in your head, whatever, right? Energy matter, mind is energy matter. Mind is not conscious. You are conscious of what's going on in the mind, right? There's no little man inside a computer giving you the answers that you're asking for, right? You have a database. I want to know all the people who live in Flatbush Avenue in Fenimore. There's not a little man inside there saying, well, let me see, and puts it up on the screen. Energy, matter, has this property that within its own symbol system or architecture, whatever, can manifest effects without, of course, being a living thing or conscious or whatever. Is that clear to you? Huh? So, the will, consciousness, will, being is dualized into non-matter, non-energy, and energy matter. Correct? This non-material, non-energy is divided into consciousness, will as well. You see another dualization inside here, right? Huh? Sure? Consciousness is the receptive aspect of the self, and will is the active aspect of the self, right? This dualization in terms of, active on and inactive, receptive or initiating or whatever, is what the Chinese call yin and yang. Did the decision have such understanding? Of course, and they call it Shu and Tefnut. So the principal duality is held in the doctrine of Shu and Tefnut. Shu will be the positive, correspond to the Chinese yang. Tefnut will be the negative, correspond to the Chinese yin. Tefnut is receptive, Shu is outgoing. The active, the quote passive, right? So when you go to Egyptian books and you read that Shu is the air god and Tefnut is a water god, Laugh. Have a good laugh. Air versus water and earth are nothing else but, metaphors used to capture the nature of the principle of duality. Air will rise and fill up this room. Water would, fall down. You're passive. You know what I'm saying? And so on. So Tefnut is not water or moisture, and Shu is not air or fire. Air and fire versus water and earth are nothing else but, metaphors to help you understand the principle of dualization. Contrasting, To telegraph down the road. When the Europeans speak of the many gods of ancient Egypt, no, there are different conceptualizations of divinity. See that? Ptah is not a god. Ptah is a conceptualization. The way the Supreme Being was conceptualized in one of the, university temples at Menefer. Is that clear to you? As opposed to at Anu, the Supreme Being is conceptualized, you see, as Osir and Ra. Is that clear to you? So throughout in the history of Kemet, there were different universities that, in a society that is some 4,000-5,000 years of age, different concepts develop. Like in the Western world, we have the physics of Sir Isaac Newton, which explained a lot of things and made a lot of physics and scientific accomplishment possible. And then comes Einstein with an entirely different science that cannot be, integrated and reconciled with Newtonian physics, and should have destroyed Newtonian physics, but it didn't. So here we have two physics that are very, opposite to each other, contradictory, and should refute one another, existing side by side, because they're different conceptualizations. There's not an Einstein universe or no Newton universe. They're different conceptualizations, different symbolic sets that leads the understanding to that reality, different ways of manipulating, symbols to manipulate reality. So that in Kemet, you see, when I speak about Osir and Ra, and I speak about Ptah, and so forth, I'm using different conceptual models. And people think the model is the thing itself. Oh, they worship many gods. Heck no. They have different conceptual models for understanding God. Sign of a fertile mind, a culture with fertility, creativity. Huh? Energy matter and non-energy matter. On one side is energy matter, on the other side is non-energy matter. Right? So this energy matter is unconscious, okay? And it is the not self. Okay? Energy matter is what we would call spirit. So you see, for example, in the Hebrew Bible, right? It's a very interesting thing. You got to read carefully and go back and meditate on what you read. It says in the creation story, right? And the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. You remember that? Y'all remember that, right? You lie. You never read the Bible. Come on now. It's all right if you didn't read the Bible. And the Spirit of God hovered over the waters of the deep. Well, it didn't say that God was a spirit. It said the Spirit of God. It's expressing a duality. Here is God, and here is the Spirit. It is not God that's hovering over the water. It is God's Spirit, the Ruach. Ruach Elohim hovers over the Tohu and Bohu. Hey, is that clear to you? In the Kamitic system, this spirit, we call it Ra. And the self, the consciousness will, we call it, before it manifests itself in the world, it is called Atum. But Atum is what we call an adjective noun. An adjective noun, meaning it is the name that we give to something, but that name is really descriptive of the attributes and qualities of the thing. Let me give you an example. For example, let's say that Camille, right? Let's say that you have mastered the magic of invisibility. You've made yourself invisible and can't bring yourself back. That's a problem, but it has its perks. Right? And you do wonderful things. You go around the world as a super heroine, a shiro. Right? You're doing all these great things and so forth. So we refer to her as the invisible. You follow what I'm saying? We call her invisible. So that her attribute has become her name. She's the only one that has that attribute. You're the one now. Okay? So when we say invisible is here. So invisible, what's a noun now? It's a proper name. But it's really an adjective that describes an attribute, correct? So Atum is not a god, eh? Atum is nothing else but an adjective that has been elevated to the level of a noun. Okay? It is an adjective, it's the word that we would use to indicate a reality that is imponderable and irreducible. Something that cannot be multiplied. When we can conceive, right, the idea of something that cannot be multiplied, cannot be divided. You can't add to it, you can't subtract to it. It is complete, perfect, one way. It is immutable, unalterable. Is that clear to you? And you say, well, gee, if something exists, you should be able to feel it, touch it, act on it. So what we say, but it is, cannot be altered, cannot be touched, felt. There's no energy and matter in it. You see that? That's what the meaning of the word atum. Greek young man went to Egypt to study. And he went to the temple of Anu and received his teaching. And he ran back to Greece. And it says that underlying all things is the atom. And the Greek says, well, what's the atom? Well, it's something that cannot be reduced, cannot be divided, because it's the primordial nature of all things. Explain to us further. He says, well, if you can, take a particle like a drop of water or a grain of sand and split it, and split it, and split it, you will get to a speck of atom that cannot be further split anymore. So what Democritus did was to explain to the Greeks a material version of the concept of atum, because he could not, you follow what I'm saying? He could not, when he got to the point where he's standing at the abyss of non-materiality, he said, well, it cannot exist. The Hebrew Kabbalists have a phenomenal name for atum. They call it Ein. You heard of Ein Sof? Huh? Well, Ein corresponds to atum and Sof corresponds to, the energy matter side of things. Right? And the light that is generated from Sof is Ra. Ra has a dash over it, so it's really Ra, R-A-U, and that's where the Latin people got their word or for light, and aurum for gold. Aura, and so forth. Yeah? And the crooks, they change it to Re, so that you don't see the connection. They change Ra to Re. The sun god. It's not the sun god. The sun is Aten, right? Aten, that's the Egyptian name for the sun. Or the T becomes a D, and it's really Adon, or Adonai, the Lord. That's what the one sun said, there's only one Adonai, but that's what some people worship, the one sun. Now, so atum is a adjective noun. The invisible. But what's your real name? So atum in the scripture says, my name is Osiris. See that? In our cosmology, the name of the self, the consciousness that says, I am God, says, my name is Osiris. In the Anu tradition, in the Anu cosmology, in other words, there were different colleges. And the colleges, of course, were all religious colleges, right? Here we have Marymount, or Xavier, or St. So-and-so University, right? Right? But all the universities in Kamitic were spiritual, were religious, because we could never separate, education from religion. We would never conceive of separating the state from religion, because the king is just simply the figurehead for God. That's all he was. So were the queens. So in the College of Anu, A-N-N-U, okay? One of the most powerful universities. That would be like the Oxford in England and, what's the baddest school here? Yale or Harvard or Columbia, right? Okay? The Patah University would have been like City College. In other words, the different schools that had the real deal, you follow what I'm saying? You really want to get your PhD in spirituality, you go to Anu. Right? I'm a scribe of Anu. That's like I'm a Yale man. Like I go to Oxford University. Is that crazy to you? I want you to put it into perspective. I want you to begin to feel Kemet. All right? Can't get it from the books. You can only get it from someone who remembers that life back then, right? So, the name that in the cosmogony of Anu, that Atum, another name for the self, let's skip that right now. Osiris is the name. It says, my name is Osiris in the book of the transformations of Ra and of overcoming evil. Opep, right? The Supreme says, my name is Osiris. You see that? And my name is a word of power. These are the foundations of the Kamitic tradition. Your name ought to be a word of power. If your name is not a word of power, you're missing some power points. You know, play those Pac-Man games where you have to get power to play the game to succeed, right? Well, in Kamitic, you know, tradition, we always trying to accumulate power. If you're impotent, that's a bad thing, right? It's not good to be impotent in a world where power is everything. Because this is where you live. So, the unmanifested aspect of God's self is called Osiris, right? Okay? And the manifested aspect of God is called Osir. We drop the ES at the end, right? To distinguish the unmanifested, yeah, before God manifests himself, before God creates the world, it calls itself Osiris. And when the self of man comes to dwell in God's spirit, in man's spirit, it is called Osir. So Osir is God's self. Not God. God's self. Right? Because God also has a body, correct? God's self dwelling in man is called Osir. So the two major traditions in Kemet, you know, is the teachings of God's self, which is the doctrines of Osir, and the doctrine of Ra. Is that clear to you? And they were elaborated at the University Temple complex of Anu. You with me? A lot of Egyptologists jumble up the different teachings. You with me? Okay? When you study Kemet, you got to study the different dynasties, the different periods. You find, like in the 18th dynasty, for example, in the temple complex of Amen, they try to amalgamate everything into one doctrine. The teachings of Ptah school, the teachings of the Anu school, and so on. Clear to you? This circle is you. Within the circle is a smaller circle. We call it yourself, right? So this little inner circle here is yourself, and the circle that contains it is your vehicle. Correct? So yourself has no energy, no matter. Correct? It is consciousness, it is will. So this little circle corresponds to that which in your being answers for I. That which is consciousness itself, that which wills, that which understands, that which knows, that which recognizes. Fair? And because it has no energy and matter, it has to dwell in a vehicle that provides energy and matter for it. You see that? So this is, vehicle is your spirit. And we use the word spirit as a catchword for what we call the divine spirit, DS, the mind, and the animating or animal spirit, and the physical body, right? So this vehicle is spirit, right? But it is a composite. Yeah, made up of divine spirit, spirit of mind, an animating or animal spirit, and the physical body. Because consciousness will attune, right, is, Atum describes what it is, right? That which is conscious as you right now has no energy and no matter. That's why when you say, I am going to stop doing so and so, it doesn't happen right away. Because that which says, I am going to start doing this doesn't have the energy to stop it. Right? And this I is constantly struggling with the energy matter part of being, isn't it? It's trying to control it. Life is the first part of life, which goes on for several incarnations, several lifetimes. It's this I trying to program, to gain control, to master this vehicle of energy and matter. I don't know why I get angry and upset. I don't know why I'm afraid. I don't like the way, I don't like my person. I don't like this about, you say me, but you use the wrong language. It's it. You're trying to control it. Because it is not you. Right? Guy comes home, finds his mate in bed, loses it, kills the person. Temper insanity. I didn't do it. Your Honor, next thing I knew, man, it's like all this blood on the place and I don't know what happened. If you said that I hit her over the head with a chandelier or whatever, I guess I must have did it, but I have no recollection of it. So people come to recognize, you see that, the difference between the self and the energy matter vehicle. And using an imprecise language, a language that transfers the qualities of the not self, meaning the spirit, to the self, can keep you struggling with the spirit for thousands of years, tens of incarnations, just by mislabeling. They call hydrogen sulfur and oxygen copper, right? And give the qualities of copper to hydrogen and so forth, and you will never get your chemistry together. I don't care how long you work at it. That's what's been happening. That's why you're finally here. After so many incarnations, you finally got to the place where we can set, because you see, the work has to begin by putting the mind in order. They said that it's a battle of the minds. You got to understand that. It's a battle of the minds. When the Egyptian person, you see, went through the judgment at initiation and after death, in life, during initiation, and in death at the final judgment, you see, it was the words that were judged. You see that? And when you pass your initiation, when you pass on to become a God woman or God man, you're called a Ma'acheru. Ma'acheru. True a word. Meaning that the words you speak about who you are and what kind of being you are and what is going on in your life and in the world are true words. If every thought that you had was correct concerning your nature and the world, your words will produce magical effects in the world. That's the foundation. You hear what I'm saying? I'm going to say it again. Because I know some of you are waiting for me to give you some special mantra and special herbs and roots and whatever to acquire magical powers. If every word that you use to explain who you are and what God is and your relationship to God and what the world is and what's going on, what's happening here in this marriage, if every word that you use is correct, represents the truth, then your words will have magical power. There's no such thing as words of power. That's a Western concatenation. There's the empowerment of your words. Actually, all your words have power. If I were to wire you up right now to EEG and EKG machines and, to track all your vital signs, right? And I call out the name of, let's say I said to you, pinprick, your vital signs will go negative. All right? If I call the name of something you like, I will get a spike of energy, representing, pleasure, right? If I call up the name of something that you didn't like or afraid of, I'll get a, negative, curve, right? Graph, and so on. Is that clear to you? You got to understand that. So, this circle represents your being, right? Okay? This little circle is the I, the self. You must know that you are composed of an energy matter, which is not self, but you are that which is devoid of energy matter, that which says, I am. You stop there. I am. If I say, is it you? You say, yes, it is I. That recognize the statement and answered is devoid of energy and matter. Right? So let's speak spiritually correct. You've heard of political correctness? Politically correct speech? Huh? Now I'm going to give you an exercise. Spiritually correct speech. I want you to go home and start to cultivate spiritually correct speech. Right? So, seeing the duality of life, I am hungry. Is that spiritually correct? But you said so earlier today, didn't you? You said, boy, I'm hungry. How about, what do you say to your husband or your wife when he or she says, honey, do you love me? What do you say? Come on, folks, See, now we have to initiate you. We have to take initiation. If my wife asks me, do you love me? I said, baby, my heart yearns for you. My heart aches for you. My heart's been beating double time all day for you. Not, see, not I, but my heart. Right? The Zen Buddhists had a tradition they called Zyozin Ryori. Zyozin Ryori. It was a dietary system that led to spiritual upliftment. A way of eating certain kind of foods and a way of approaching eating that was a whole ritual to promote your divinity. Well, in Kamitic, we had a ritual, the ritual of Ma'akeru. So the Western Egyptologist just simply says that, oh, you declared Ma'akeru, but Ma'akeru is something you have to practice. You're with me? The Ma'akeru rituals is, I call it today SLP, Spiritual Linguistic Programming. Eh? See, your words keep programming, reinforcing programs. See, when you go to the Hindu school, what are the spiritual exercises they present you with? Yoga? Oh, what are you doing yoga for? No, that's just, you don't need to do yoga to sit in meditation. Okay? You ever seen the statues of a Buddha sitting in the lotus posture? That's not a meditation posture. That's a Tantra yoga posture. Right? Okay? That's for Tantra yoga. One heel is under the testicles to block the passage of semen out, and the other heel is above on the pubic area. Okay? So it's a double blockage. And then the dakini, the yogini, the female yogi will come and then straddle. And that, what's called the so-called the Padmasana is called the greatest asana. And so for that, Hatha yoga is called, actually Gatastha yoga. That's the original name of it. Ha is the sun and Tha is the moon. So Hatha yoga are exercises to bring about a combination of the yin and yang, the lunar and solar forces within you. So when you study Hatha yoga properly, you see that, meaning that, Hatha, the yoga asanas are preludes to what? The breathing techniques, pranayamas, right? And the essence of pranayama is Mahabandha yoga, where you have the triple bandhas, the triple binding, right, of the three major currents within you. You bind them up, okay, to achieve what? A state where you bring about a quietness in the energy matter part of being. Because the energy matter part of being is what breathes. You don't need breath. You're just consciousness. There's no energy matter within you. So what I'm simply saying to you is that you go to the Hindu school and they have not made clear what the purpose of the teachings are for. People do yoga, they do pranayama, and it's not clear to them, like, okay, how is this going to lead to me becoming a god woman, a god man? What's the goal here? What is you know what I'm saying? Right? The Egyptians built the baddest civilization on earth, didn't they? Because their religious system, their spiritual practice was to bring about, create god men and god women. Not when you become a god man, or 25% on your way to become a god woman or god man, you're throwing on pyramids already. You're throwing on some great architecture, scientific accomplishments, because you are becoming, divinization means you are awakening your genius, your creativity. You got to understand what is the purpose of all of this. Why are you going to come here every Saturday? The goal is so that, a month or 6 or 18 months from now, shouldn't take much longer, okay, you will be healthier, more productive, more creative, successful. Right? This is why you're coming here to achieve. You see that? This society started in 1973 in Harlem. Now we're all over the world. You see that? Being recognized by kings all over Africa and so on. You see that we accomplish things. Why? Because our teachings is to help us to activate and clarify the aspects of our being that enable us to know who we are and how to use our faculties productively and successfully. Is that clear to you? It has to be clear to you, what are you pursuing with spirituality? I could take the Christian Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, and put the real title on it and then give you a guide to the book. And I bet you go home and read the book. Okay? If I say, ancient teachings for success, instead of the Holy Bible, and I gave you now a guide, right, on how to understand that book, do you find a phenomenal success system? If you did this, so you change your thinking this way here, when so-and-so happens within you, recite this psalm, recite this proverb, pray it, change your thinking, then you become more successful. Though I walk in the valley of the shadows of death, right? Though I walk in Flatbush and Church Avenue at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the thugs in the street corner, I fear no evil. Right? But what do you say? Oh man, it's scary out here. And you call yourself a Christian. If you're a Christian and you accept anger and fear, you're not a Christian. You follow what I'm saying? What did Moses fear? What did Jesus fear? What did Jeremiah fear? The Bible is still parables for Christians. So you got to understand, you see, that what you got to practice it. You're going to have the ritual. Okay? In other words, we have a word called hesi. Hesi. The Hindu says sadhana. Spiritual realization is in the hesi. It's in the sadhana. It is not in the understanding of the principle, it's in the daily working with the principles. If you don't have a daily practical application, it doesn't matter if you understood, oh man, that was a great lecture Sheikh Mashaykhim gave, on February so-and-so, 19 so-and-so. Man, I can never forget that lecture, man. All right. And you understand it, but day by day, you didn't nurture yourself, so you died of starvation. You're going to nurture, the same way you nurture the physical body, you have to give food to the mind. Okay? It is the mind part of the not self. The mind part of the not self where the work is done. Right? You got to feed the mind the right thoughts. Okay? The not self is divided up into the divine spirit, that's a part of you that contains the laws that governs the spirit and governs life. Okay? The not self, right, is composed also of the animating spirit, the spirit that animates, the energy part of the spirit of not self, that is the energy behind the reasoning process, the thinking process, right? If you go into shock, your thinking becomes paralyzed, right? That's the animating principle that was shocked, correct? thinking involves content and function. There are thoughts, that's the content. Right? But then there's the association of thoughts. Right? According to whatever similarity, milk white, milk breast, right? Right? Breast cows, cows, bulls, bulldogs, canine, right? That's a simple association of words, right? But then the words are also associated logically, right? If so-and-so is so-and-so, then so-and-so is so-and-so. Those are logical, right? So they are associations, but that is an animation process, right? So the energy part of the not self governs the thought processes. You with me? But it also governs the physiological functions of the body, right? So the animating principle is very important. It governs the thought processes, not the thought contents, right? Okay? And it governs the physiological processes of the physical body, correct? So we have divine spirit, okay? We have the mind, right? 1, divine spirit. 2, mind. 3, animating spirit. And 4, physical body, correct? There is the self, which is non-energy, non-matter. Then there's the not self, which is divine spirit, mind, animating spirit, right? And physical body, correct? And the animating spirit plays a major role because it governs the mental functions and the physiological functions, right? When you want to go to Egypt to study the self, the knowledge of yourself is found in the Osirian teachings. So here you are living in ancient Egypt, in the 4th dynasty, and you're ready to know everything about yourself. I'm ready to learn everything about that part of my being that answers for I, that understands, that knows, right? There was a university that you went to. Can't do that today, unless you come to a Sabbath sect. There's a university that you went to. You don't really have all kinds of books and ceremonies and meditations, teachings, and all of that to educate you. Huh? Right. Is rubbing? Okay, that's better? Okay. There is a meditation, ritual, books, entire system, university that will learn everything about that which says I. Right? The teachings, the Syrian teachings. And to learn everything about the not self, the energy matter part of you, right? Or the teachings of Ra. You see that? The initiation system to help you, to assist consciousness to identify with itself and not with the not self part of being, right? Or the Osirian teachings. You with me? But the not self is the vehicle of energy and matter. That's where all the chakras are. All the spiritual powers are. The different bodies, the mind, the divine spirit, the animating spirit, the physical body, all of that, right, is another college, and that was the so-called theology of Ra. Clear? All right? And one of the major teachings are the teachings of Ma'ak Heru. Okay? And it has to do with what follows the I am. In the Hebrew Kabbalah is, the Kabbalists were those Hebrews who were initiated in ancient Egypt. And they had to keep their teachings secret because Kabbalah was, up to this day, not recognized by Orthodox Judaism. You with me? Most people heard about Kabbalah after Madonna joined the Kabbalah Center. Even the young kids know Kabbalah now because Madonna is studying Kabbalah. Eheye. Eheye. I am that I am, says the Hebrew Kabbalist. Meaning that if I say I am, what do I follow with? The Hindu says, I am that. What? That. What are you? That. What is that? It is that. Those were meditation pieces. When, God appeared in the burning bush to Moses, right? In Mount Sinai, and gave him the tablets of the law. Moses said, well, who should I tell him sent me? God answers, I am that I am. Go back and say, I am that I am sent you. Meaning that, where do you get the laws from? If you want to go with me in spirit to get the laws, you have to go to I am. Because all the 11 laws of life are to change the not-self, to make the not-self conform to the attributes of yourself. If you have no energy and no matter, that which is I has no energy and no matter, it can't be hungry, it can't be afraid, it can't be angry, it cannot, you follow what I'm saying? It cannot love, it can perceive these things happening in the not-self, right? And the not-self, the energy matter part of being, well, all kind of things happen. Love and hatred, selfishness and selflessness, and all practicing spiritual correctness in your speech. Spiritually correct speech. Okay? Start to think about how could I answer. Okay? Just start with yourself. Set up a little meditation and visualize yourself, having a talk with somebody. Right? Or just with your own person. Am I hungry or am I perceiving hunger in my vehicle? Am I angry or am I perceiving anger in my vehicle? You with me? But is there such a thing as anger? Or is anger a mislabeling of an illness in the body of energy? You go to the ancient Chinese, they have no word for anger. What you call anger, they simply call it a deviation in the liver gallbladder meridian. So spoke the enlightened Taoist of antiquity. What you call fear was nothing else but a mislabeling of the a deficiency in the kidney yang energy system. Fear and anger were things that you corrected with acupuncture, acupressure, and herbs, and certain healing sounds. Not things that told you how to respond to somebody and how to react in life, but things that conditioned you had to medicate. See that? The world has been taken over by very ignorant people. So you have your exercise, come back next week and we will share, huh? I'm going to, I want you to bring me a list of ways, in which you will say things differently. Instead of saying, I'm hungry, or I have a headache, or, right? And that's the first part of the exercise. And then, what you think you ought to do about it. If you are hungry, okay, I'm not hungry. I'm perceiving hunger. Then later on, you might increase the exercise by asking, why is there hunger? I just got to eating a Twinkie, 5 minutes ago. Why am I experiencing hunger? Okay? Is it true hunger, or is it low blood sugar? See that? You see that? I am hungry, or I'm perceiving hunger in my vehicle. Is my vehicle sick? Is my vehicle well? In harmony? Now you begin to have a dialogue. Thinking, it's not thinking like a little dialogue going on in the head. Are there two of you in there? Perhaps three. You'd be surprised how many personas. One self, many personas. They said the devil is legion. Okay, next week, folks. Thank you very much. 50 minutes, huh?